The horror came unexpectedly and unjustly. Everything was going smoothly and well, if not improving, and now I don't even know what to do or how to behave. Horror came, not as a polite guest, but as a brazen, tactless intruder. He came and stayed within me, around me. Let me tell you my story. I sincerely hope for, if not practical advice, then at least support. It happened literally a few days ago, maybe a week ago. Amanda washed the dishes, prepared dinner, and quietly dozed off in front of the TV, while my buddy and I were sitting in the kitchen chatting about work. He was drinking beer. I was having coffee. I still had to drive him home, so I refused alcohol. We lingered and didn't leave until closer to 1 in the morning. We took a little ride around the city, chatting some more, circling familiar routes. Long story short, I only returned home around 3. It was quiet in the apartment, the TV was off, and Amanda was barely audible, snuggled under the blanket where I usually lie. I desperately wanted to sleep. I quickly undressed and slipped under the covers to Amanda. I was thinking about something, pondering, went out for a cigarette. I'm lying there. I remember a passing thought how everything is good and peaceful. I even smiled at the darkness. Then suddenly Amanda's hand lay on my chest. Nothing special, except the hand was as cold as ice. I flinched. The next moment, the hand tightened, and her well-groomed, manicured nails mercilessly dug into my flesh. I screamed and recoiled, looking at my wife in bewilderment. Remembering the image that appeared before my eyes, I still tremble with a slight tremor. 2 huge, shimmering eyes stared at me without blinking in the darkness. They were silvery white, like pearls, and unnaturally bright. It wasn't Amanda. It was her body, her hair, her nightgown again. But she wasn't my meek, devotedly loving wife. She was some sort of witch, a monster. Her plump, juicy lips stretched into 2 thin, lilac threads. Her teeth were clenched tightly. Her eyebrows were raised as if something had surprised the monster. In general, the face staring at me at that moment expressed complete madness. I grew cold. From horror, my lungs twisted in spasms, the scream stuck somewhere in my throat, and a giant, slimy toad stirred in my stomach. The monster meanwhile stirred, turned its face to the wall, then back to me, waved its hands over the sheet, digging its nails into the fabric, and growled. That sound still echoes in my head. I've never heard anything like it before. A terrifying, guttural growl, particularly loud and distinct in the nighttime silence. The voice changed noticeably. The monster didn't growl with a female voice, nor a male one, but with something animalistic, or at least non-human. It was a low, raspy, leathery bass, somewhat akin to the sound of an idling 8-cylinder engine. I was ready to lose consciousness from fear, but I slowly got up from the bed and, without daring to exhale, shuffled to the door. Amanda, it seemed, didn't try to follow me. She just awkwardly sat up in bed and watched me with her dead, expressionless gaze. The horrifying growling didn't stop. I couldn't take my eyes off her. The moon illuminated her tousled hair, the exposed shoulder under her nightgown, the pale skin and sunken cheeks. She always had a cute, round face, but now her features seemed sunken and deflated. When I accidentally kicked a stool, the monster opened its mouth and snarled something in my direction. Then the stool crashed to the floor. I don't know how my heart endured it, ready to leap out of my chest at any moment. When I finally reached the door, my wife clumsily began to rise from the bed, swaying from side to side like a puppet. I stepped into the hallway and quietly closed the door, gripping the handle tightly. I was so scared in those moments. I didn't want to believe in everything that was happening, but I couldn't disbelieve it either. I stood there for a long time, gripping the door handle. In the pitch-black darkness and complete silence, everything seemed surreal and unreal. Fear gave way to some subdued detachment. But then I heard footsteps outside the door, and the fear returned with double force. I listened agonizingly to every sound. There she went along the bed, the window, paused for a moment, moved toward the door, brushed against the overturned stool, paused again, and then slowly returned to the window. And all the while whimpering, wheezing, and mumbling something incoherent and hardly articulate. But then the monster fell silent, and there was silence. I stood there, motionless. All I could hear was my heart pounding desperately and nothing else. I wanted to go to the bathroom. I wanted a drink and a smoke. I wanted everything to be back to normal, just like it was half an hour ago. I could have run away. The front door was right there, but I stood frozen. After all, it was my home, and behind that door, though crazed, was still my wife. Although, who am I kidding? My legs were numb with fear, as if they were rooted to the floor. An hour passed, or maybe just a minute. Unfortunately, my nose itched. Such a mundane, earthly, and natural desire. Sweet, good. I slowly peeled one hand away from the door and, trying not to disturb the air too much, brought it to my face. At that moment, a voice came from the other side of the door. Not a growl, not a rasp, but an actual voice, rough, angry, clearly hardened. My hair stood on end, he was so terrifying. As cliché as it may sound, my wife was speaking in Greek or Latin. That characteristic sound, easily recognizable after watching a couple of trashy horror movies. But I wasn't in a movie, and it wasn't some dark magician speaking, it was my own wife. She spoke for a long time, struggling to put words together syllable by syllable, occasionally breaking into a scream. I was already at the brink of despair and was ready to run to the kitchen for a knife to end this nightmare. My wife stopped mid-sentence, and to my horror, I felt someone on the other side of the door grab the handle. The door pulled, not too hard at first, then again and again, persistently and strongly, so that with each attempt, the gap widened. I clenched my teeth, fully committed to silent resistance, every muscle in my body tensed. But it was futile. Another minute, and the same deathly white eye was staring at me through the gap. Amanda's face seemed even more disfigured. She was twisted, her eyes blinked often and meaninglessly, her mouth opened and closed, not making a sound, saliva trickled down her chin. The monster tried to push its face through the gap, but the opening was not large enough. I saw one eye, then the other, and sometimes just the nose and chin. At some point she froze, moved away from the gap, and silently stared at me. For the first time in this terrifying, beastly guise, there was some semblance of awareness. "Bestia," the creature hoarsely whispered, and at that moment it released the door handle. I was left again in silence, listening as what was recently my beloved wife, Amanda, shuffled her feet across the floor, moving towards the bed. After a few minutes, the springs creaked, and everything fell silent. I understood that I could release the door by now, but I didn't do it. Instead, I held onto the handle tighter and quietly cried. "Michael?" A quiet, familiar voice called out. "Michael, where are you?" My wife Amanda, it was her. "Michael." She shifted on the bed, exhaled loudly, and puckered her lips. "Michael." The reverse transformation scared me almost as much as everything that preceded it. I nervously licked my dry lips and, still not releasing the door, responded. "I'm here." "In the kitchen." "Smoking again?" There was a hint of disapproval in her voice. "Yeah, smoking. Darling, could you please bring me some water?" There it was. "All right, I'll finish my cigarette and bring it." "Okay." With an effort of will, I loosened my grip and headed to the kitchen. Every patch of darkness frightened me. Every object could turn into some creature at any moment. Like on prosthetics, I made my way to the kitchen, poured some water, and returned to the door. Gathering all my courage, I entered. At the last moment, I thought, what if it's a trap? What if the demon is pretending and is waiting for me to embrace me? But no. Amanda was lying on the bed, my dearly loved, tender, and infinitely beautiful wife. She looked pale and sick. No wonder. I froze in the doorway. My hands trembled, and the water was about to spill from the glass. "What's wrong?" Amanda propped herself up on her elbow. "Nothing. Give me some water." I walked into the room, mechanically uprighted the stool, approached the bed, and handed the glass to my wife. She drank greedily, downing every last drop, and then collapsed onto the pillow, letting out a short moan. "How do you feel?" I whispered hoarsely. "My head hurts, and my stomach, it's pulling unpleasantly. Do you need a pill?" "No, just let's sleep." "All right." Amanda closed her eyes. I lay down next to her and pulled the blanket up to my nose. Soon, Amanda breathed calmly and evenly, like sleeping people do. I, for some reason, couldn't sleep. 20 minutes later, she turned onto her side and hugged me. Out of fear, I shrunk into a ball. My scratched chest was unpleasantly sore, but it was nothing compared to what was happening in my head. I decided to pray, although I had never done it before, and didn't believe in God at all. I strained my memory and whispered the first lines of Our Father with my lips only. At that moment, the hand on my chest tensed slightly, not too much, but enough for me to feel it, as if warning me. I abandoned the idea of praying, and I lay there, afraid to move. And in my head, a hoarse voice repeated over and over, "Bestia." Conclusion. The most interesting part is at the end. Although nothing more mystical happened since that night, my life turned into sheer torture. I'm scared, so scared that I'm about to go crazy. Maybe I already have. Maybe it happened long before that night, and everything that happened is just a product of my sick imagination. But no. Day after day, night after night, I'm forced to reassure myself of the reality of everything happening around me. I want to run away, but there's nowhere to run. Thoughts of suicide come more and more often, but will it be comforting, or will it make things worse? How long will I endure, staying in my right mind? The worst thing happened yesterday. I was sitting in the kitchen, grimly flipping through a desk calendar, when Amanda burst into the apartment, glowing with happiness. "Michael." "Mickey." I looked at her with a tired glance. "Yes, dear." Michael." The girl was literally gasping for joy. "I haven't told you. I was in the hospital, undergoing tests. I'm pregnant, Michael." I slumped in my chair, not knowing what to think. It seemed like the last string in my head had snapped. My heart sank. "Pregnant. So there it is. And you're not happy?" Amanda laughed. I am, of course." On cotton legs, I got up from the chair and hugged my wife. There was no strength to feign joy. Let her think I'm in shock from this news. All men are shocked by such news. "My dear Mickey." She pulled back a little and looked me in the eyes. "We're having a baby. Our little one." "Yes," I repeated mechanically. "Our little one." My poor, unfortunate Amanda. I looked at her delighted face, shining eyes, and smile. All of this was familiar and familiar. But my gaze didn't miss something else, as if behind Amanda's round, childish face hid something alien, unfamiliar, and strange, with thin, thread-like lips and eyes shimmering with pearl-like brilliance. The beast didn't go anywhere. "Tell me, what should I do?" "Lord, help me, please.